I welcome each of you here today, and I thank you for being here because we know that today is an important day. I am especially thankful to those of you who have tuned in online, recognizing that we were unable to accommodate each and every person that expressed interest today. The cost of living in Bermuda has become a constant talking point and has become a weight that many can no longer carry. This summit is organized for you, those who are unclear, feel unheard, unseen, and underserved. Please know that this summit was intentionally curated with a diversity of voices to provide clarity, confirm that we are listening, acknowledge your experiences, and commit to serve your interest differently.
Understanding the cost of living and what the data tells us. My job is to talk about how did we get here? And I'm going to tell a story about how we got here. So in the beginning, many of you probably can't remember 1989, but that was a pretty good year for the hospitality sector. Tourism accounted for 38% of economic activity as measured by gross domestic product. And international business at the time was in its infancy, representing only 17%. Bermuda today is in a sort of very different position. The growth of international business really took off in, 1992, in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, I believe it was. Influx of capital into Bermuda, growth in the industry, and we had this sort of reorganization, what I termed here a resource movement, basically out of the hospitality, out of tourism, and into international business. And the effect of resources moving from the hospitality sector into international business, this resource movement effect, had the impact of driving wages up, not only in the international business sector, but in all of our sectors, in construction, housing, energy, and groceries. And it's not hard for people to understand why there has been this resource movement from the sort of flagging tourism sector into the booming IB sector. And with that, higher wages in construction, housing, energy, and in fact, tourism. Higher wages lead to higher prices, and you get this gradual increase in the cost of living. Today, tourism accounts for 3%, and that's a sorry thing because many of us have sort of thrown tourism in the dustbin. Of course, we forget that it is still a major employer, especially of blue-collar labor, and international business now, accounts for well over a quarter of our economic activity. Now, there's been major inequality that's been occurring since 2000 in the IB sector. Median incomes in international business are north of $170,000 a year, whereas median incomes in the hospitality sector are around $40,000 a year, and the gulf is getting wider and wider.
The Ministry of Home Affairs undertook a survey, a multi-part survey, trying to get a fundamental understanding of where we sit in terms of cost of living. I want to contextualize that survey for those of you who are data integrity experts. And so this was a participation voluntary study, and that means that only the people who wanted to do the survey did the survey. That also means that the opinions reflected in the survey are of those who participated. So we can't extrapolate those to the population just yet, but this is an initial framework for us to begin a conversation about where we are going, the themes that were established in that conversation, and what that can lead us into in terms of future discussions. Is that clear for everyone? Yes? I'm a teacher by trade, so that's a thing for me, feedback. So are we clear together? Yes. All right. Just making sure that we're all on the same page. Collaboration is going to be important moving forward. So what was the purpose of the survey in terms of the overall intent? It was to assess the impact of the cost of living on Bermuda's residents and businesses. I'll give you some demographic breakdown in terms of the respondents to the survey, again, asking you to contextualize for yourself that this was voluntary. It is also meant to inform data-driven decision-making and guide the government into action. And what are we going to find? Well, 2,272 responses were from residents in Bermuda. That's fairly robust if you think about it being voluntary and we didn't ask everyone to do it in order to keep their lights on. So that's important. 274 organizations representing business stakeholders were respondents. And the majority of the respondents in terms of business size were actually small businesses, which is very important to note.
In this panel discussion, our goal is to look under the hood of our import system and ask, where are the real cost drivers? What risks do our supply chains face? What's within Bermuda's control? And where can real change happen?
So, what are the cost drivers now of the shipping industry? One is economies of scale. So Bermuda doesn't have economies of scale, whether it's the importers importing watermelons or the shipping lines themselves. So our ship, the Oleander, the largest of the 3 ships that services Bermuda, weekly from New Jersey, we have unionized labor both here in Bermuda and in New Jersey. It's public knowledge that last October, the Longshoremen's Association that services all the East Coast of the US, they received a contract increase over a 5-year period of over 60%. So as a shipper, we have no control over what that cost is. So that's an excess of 12% per year that is now being forced upon the shipping lines.
From driving costs as well, the small ship market, small ships, we have miniature ships compared to the rest of the world. Our ships can carry 350 20-foot containers, and you think a norm now, I think I wrote it down somewhere, a norm now is between 4,000 and 8,000 containers. So, and that's a norm. That's not, that's a norm like, the Norwegian breakaway is a norm now, that doesn't fit into Hamilton. So these ships can, I did ask one of our shipping agents, okay, so what would you think is a ship that could get to Murray's Anchorage? And he said, well, 5 Fathom Hole, we can fit a 1,000 TEU ship. So we have 350, just to get to 5 Fathom Hole, which is actually outside of Bermuda, it's not going inside, is 1,000. And the norm is between 4 and 8. So it really speaks to the scale that we have. So, but also with the 3 ships, again, that makes it perhaps more expensive in some ways, but we have backup, we have redundancy.
Bermuda doesn't export anything. We manufacture, we have no manufacturing per se. We grow what we can from our land, but we consume it here. So the containers that come from New Jersey or Florida to Bermuda come full, but when they return to the US, they're virtually empty. So just imagine what your air ticket would be if you flew from New York to Bermuda and your plane is pretty full, and the return journey, there was no passengers on board. So as a shipper, we still have to incur the costs of driving our ship back to New Jersey, but receiving virtually no revenue. So it's that in itself makes the service very expensive.
We have a generational relationship with the United States, UK, and Canada, but we haven't diversified and seriously looked at the Latin America and Caribbean market. Just to put things in perspective, the LAC exports $300 billion a year to the United States, Canada, and the UK. If you narrow that down 10%, $30 billion comes from the CARICOM nations and the Dominican Republic. We could then, and these exports are oil, natural gas, manufactured goods, medical utensils, and perishables, fruits and vegetables, and agriculture. If we were to start building those relationships, working with those partnerships, our purchasing power is stronger in and throughout the Caribbean. The cost of labor is less. And so what we could do is start looking there.
So there's 4 components that make up that retail price. You've got the first cost, you've got the freight, you've got the tax, then you have my markup. And as Spencer was saying, built into that markup are all of the indirect expenses that go toward running the business. Top one is labor, bank fees, credit card fees, especially if you're in retail. They're taking a percentage of every card that we swipe. Labor, electricity, insurance. It's a massive list of expenses that markup now has to cover. And like Spencer said, we're dealing in very small percentages in profit, right? And I think that is the challenge. So where are we going to attack as a solution? I think for me, it would be trying to subsidize that freight somehow.
So when we look at the duty relief, and there was that conversation that grocery stores did not pass that duty relief on to the customers. I use the example of Navel oranges. So Navel oranges, they were at 5%, the duty relief went to 0%. When we work out the 5% duty relief on one orange, that turns out to be a cost reduction of 3 cents. Prices in the US are going up 20%. So as the prices in the US are going up, the duty relief of 5% or 3 cents quickly eroded with shipping costs, trucking costs all going up. So we end up with a net zero effect. Also with the duty relief, if we're buying 75% of our product from wholesalers, we have to see the cost saving come from the duty relief that the wholesalers are getting passed on to the grocery store so that then we can pass it on to the customers. There is a chain effect.
If we can change the way that we are purchasing, the way that we at home manage our demand and manage our expectations for products, we could then maybe move into different categories, different brands, white label, private label products, which are sometimes manufactured by the same large manufacturers that we already purchase from, but that don't have the marketing associated to it, to move into that bracket pricing, which is more affordable. But we have to manage our expectations then. Is Hellmann's the best mayonnaise? I think it is. I think a lot of us do, but again, that's that stickiness of that brand loyalty. Can we go to a white label product, a private label product, which is 90% as good and meets my needs, but it's 30% cheaper?
It's really interesting because I hear a lot about brands and the importance of brands on the shelf, but the reality is when you go to a restaurant and the food comes out, nobody cares whether it's Hellmann's or whether it's Best of Bermuda, as long as it tastes fantastic and it's really good quality. So we have an opportunity in restaurants to buy white label products, to buy non-label products, and the suppliers are going to hate me saying this, but I don't want to say beef is beef is beef, but a certain grade of beef is the same, similar, across different purchasers. So guess what we in the restaurant industry do? We go with the most aggressive pricing, and we go with there's service and supply and there's other reasons in order to keep our prices down, because we know that competitively we are actually up against the grocery stores. The next choice after, and not only are we competing against each other because the stickiness of our clientele is pretty tenuous. If someone wants to have a meal, they can go to one of the 79 sit-down restaurants in Bermuda, whereas if you're really going to go to Marketplace or Lindo's or maybe Arnold's if you're shopping, we have to be so much more competitive, which is why in our industry I call it the industry of thirds. A third goes to the cost of your goods sold, a third goes to your cost of labor, And the third goes to your, overhead costs, which include rents and Belco and everything else.
From a purely economic standpoint, the Non-Profit Alliance of Bermuda cited a poverty rate of between 17% and 33% of the population. 17 to 33. The charity reported 1,101 people experiencing homelessness at the end of 2024. So perversely, trying to make food cheaper may not, in fact, be the optimum solution to food insecurity. It certainly might help on the margins. There's no disputing that. But in order for people to be food secure, Bermuda residents need a sustainable supply of nutritious food that is accessible to all.
In 1950 we were twice as many people were fishing or farming that were in the United States. We're now down to less than 1%. So there's about 100 souls involved, round numbers, of people that farm. We don't produce much food. We produce about, say, 20 to 25% of the fresh produce that's consumed in Bermuda. And obviously it's a small amount of the overall food production.
I'll let you all know today that absolutely Bermuda has enough land to grow a significant amount of food for us, for our community and population. Unfortunately, I'm sure many of you, like myself, grew up in Bermuda with a very convenient lie that we tell ourselves that there isn't enough land in Bermuda to grow food, so why focus on it? Maybe work on getting a really good job so I can, make enough money to afford food. But even if you're in that situation, unfortunately, the food that you're purchasing does not have the nutrition that it's supposed to have. That's been tracked by the USDA over the last 50 years. So yeah, we talked about the amount of land that's not being used. There's more agricultural reserve in Bermuda that's not being farmed than is being farmed at the moment.
I'm going to say something very simple, feral chickens. I mean, everybody in Bermuda sees feral chickens. They are causing a huge amount of economic damage. They are taking out, one morning will do $7,000 worth of damage to a tomato crop. One morning. They're going after melons, pumpkins, corn seed, and so there's a big thing afoot to get rid of them, and it's not easy, but there's targeted. But we need to go to war with that.
I feel would certainly help Bermuda in terms of expanding its food supply is we're closing 5 schools. Every single school on this island was once a farm. Let's convert one back into an agricultural center. Let's take one of these schools. They all have 2-acre fields that were once farms. Let's convert them back into productive market garden style, not monocropping, but market garden where we can have students from each school come one day a week.
My view is that the landscape of energy and utilities has changed from 2 decades ago to where we are now. Before, we haven't seen this much penetration of renewables. We haven't seen this much intermittency on the network. We haven't seen challenges with regards to the market forces of fuel impacting the utility and everyday users. So that has changed from where we were from back in the day. So those are some of the real challenges that we have, and those are things that we need to learn how to navigate.
If you fast forward 10 years, the new technologies that come, people not contributing to those fixed costs, we end up with a potential spiral. And that's where we need to work together to find new mechanisms, new technologies, so that we can maintain the level of reliability that Bermudians have become accustomed to.
What we're suffering from is that we've had a declining and decoupling of energy usage versus consumers. So in 2000, roughly 11 till now, we've largely had declining electricity sales. Some of it is population-based, and increasingly it's driven by energy efficiency and solar.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, looking at the lay of the land, I do believe that one of the greatest challenges is the utility death spiral, and I say that because the utility being Belco from an electricity perspective is critical, right? So essentially you need a healthy utility in order to have a healthy economy.
So it's not just about what you do, it's how you do it. So if, as an example, 10% of Bermuda just goes with strictly solar systems, it will create a very volatile electricity system. The electricity by its nature is unstable, and solar adds to that. Every time a cloud comes around, that solar disappears, Belca's got to ramp up its generators, and the cloud disappears, and Belca's got to basically take them right back off just as quickly as the environment is changing. So if you do it with storage, then you can stabilize, depending on how you configure it, you can stabilize the output of that system, not send so much volatility, have some policy around what engagement looks like between the utility and the customer. And in more advanced frameworks, you can actually have the utility sending signals to the homeowner saying, this is how I need your system to behave right now. And we can go further into distributed energy resources, but it's about how you do what you do. So you can get more renewables and deal with some of the volatility and some of the uncertainty that the utility faces. Just putting solar panels on isn't the answer. That's a disaster waiting to happen. Look at what happened with Spain and Portugal the other day. That was worst case scenario, lights out.
But volume is key. It gives the utility and the regulator a sufficient margin to be able to craft things like time of use tariffs, social tariffs, things of that sort that could be ways of addressing cost of living issues. But of course, those all have distributional costs in any event. And the more volume you have, the more you're able to absorb some of those distributional costs.
Health is a human right for all people, regardless of their social or economic background. This is why the Ministry of Health has undertaken the multi-year journey to implement universal health coverage to build a more equitable and sustainable healthcare system. Between 2007 and 2023, the total healthcare expenditure in Bermuda increased by 76% to a steep $809 million in 2023. This places Bermuda among the highest spenders on healthcare per person in the world. Yet many underinsured and uninsured people struggle to access essential healthcare services. Moreover, each time premiums increase, more individuals who cannot afford premiums are forced to drop their insurance, thus widening the coverage gap. At its core, universal health coverage prioritizes the removal of barriers like co-pays and community-based primary care. The government's plan for phased implementation includes a single-payer system to streamline payments, reduce duplication, and improve efficiency. A core benefits package informed by population health data to ensure essential services meet the needs of Bermuda's residents. And private insurers offering supplemental packages, providing additional coverage options for those who seek them.
Good day, everyone. I'm Zane De Silva, Minister of Housing and Municipalities. It's a privilege to be here at the Cost of Living Summit. Let me speak plainly. Housing is not a side issue. It affects everyone: seniors, students, essential workers, families, and the most vulnerable in our community. It is the highest cost in most of our lives. This is more than a housing issue. It's a national issue and a central part of the cost of living challenge we're here to address today.
I think we need to start with the framework of who deserves housing. So a lot of times we think about housing as this thing that we get once we earn income to provide that income to purchase a house or rent a house. But when we look at the reality of housing crisis within Bermuda right now, the cost of housing of renting is about $3,000 average. The cost of purchasing a house is about $1 million. And this panel was one of the topics was, what does this mean for young persons? Lots of young persons have no ability, no future of purchasing a house in Bermuda. There's no ability for them to earn or save. When you're paying $3,000 monthly, there's no ability for you to save enough money to purchase a house in the future.
If you took a typical Bermuda home and you tried to build that home in Central Florida, for instance, it would be many multiples more expensive than your typical stick frame house that you would see in Central Florida. And so our cost of construction is high. That's one of the reasons why it's high. Another reason is the issue of scale. Bermuda is a tiny market, and our home builders are not building anything close to scale that you can find in the US. There are builders in the US that own their own forests. They own their own quarries, and they own entire supply chains that feed into their ability to build housing affordably or at scale. And if we look at what the median wage earner makes in Bermuda, somewhere around 80 grand, and you, again, use some fairly complex calculations to say what could that person afford in terms of rents or a mortgage, I believe that the cost of construction, just construction, overshoots that by 100%, at least, before you pay for land, before you pay for financing, before you pay for certainly duty or any other thing. So we're so far, and that's at the median, so that means that 50% of the rest of the country cannot afford that.
In reality, housing impacts every income level in Bermuda. And so I think it would be a disservice to our country if we believe that housing is only impacting those at the lower income level. If we don't figure out a solution to provide this whole range of different housing types from, from just single-family homes or subsidized housing, rental units, group housing, shared accommodations, housing for the aging population, institutional housing, long-term care, and the list could go on. I don't think that we will ever solve our problems.
Today, for me, it won't just be remembered by the panel discussions, and it won't just be remembered by how we were coming in by knowing something, but we've actually left now more informed, more committed to our resolve and the requirement also to evolve as a country and as a community. The summit, for me, evolved and showed me that it was not just an industry gathering and that it was a message about our future. I feel reassured by those who were in the room, and I know that we are all leaving feeling a compelled to duty. I think the many persons who've reached out throughout today have tried to capture notes and inform the data that we've done. I know that it will inform the data that we've already captured, and today we were confronted not only about the impacts of cost, but also the cost of delay, the cost of division, and the cost of families who fall through the cracks.